It's about what?
I'm sad for those who don't feel that they are loved in order to work in this life.
In a quiet house outside Pittsburgh, in the final weeks of his life, a man the whole world thought it knew was fighting a battle no camera ever filmed. He was thin, tired, and in pain, but he still asked about the people around him before he asked about himself. That man was Fred Rogers, the cardigan-wearing television host who spent more than 3 decades telling children they were special just as they were. For years, the world believed it had seen every side of him. Then his wife, Joanne Rogers, began to speak, and what she revealed didn't destroy the myth of Mr. Rogers. It made him more human than anyone had imagined. To understand why her words mattered so much, you have to understand how complete the public image of Fred Rogers had become. He was, by nearly every account from people who worked with him, exactly as kind in private as he appeared on screen. Biographer Maxwell King, author of the widely respected 2018 book The Good Neighbor, The Life and Work of Fred Rogers, spent years interviewing colleagues, friends, and family members, and the portrait that emerged was strikingly consistent. Fred Rogers really did believe that every child deserved to feel loved, seen, and understood. He built an entire television program around that conviction, one that avoided flash and noise in favor of long pauses, direct eye contact with the camera, and honest conversations about fear, anger, and grief. But King's research, along with Joanne Rogers' own later reflections, also revealed something the public rarely considered, that kindness so consistent, so deliberate, so unwavering for over 30 years, did not come without cost. Joanne Bird Rogers was never simply the wife of Mr. Rogers. Long before she carried that title, she was building a life entirely her own. Born in 1928 in Jacksonville, Florida, she grew up in a household that valued education and the arts, and by the time she reached grade school she was already recognized as an exceptionally gifted pianist. She went on to study music performance at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, where her talent for the piano wasn't about performance for its own sake. Those who studied alongside her often said her playing carried an emotional depth that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than technique. It was at Rollins, in the late 1940s, that she met a fellow music student named Fred Rogers. Their connection did not begin with grand romantic gestures. It began in practice rooms and shared recitals, in the kind of quiet mutual respect that grows slowly and lasts. After college, Fred moved to New York to take a job with NBC, while Joanne remained in Florida to continue her studies, eventually training further at Florida State University and later at what is now Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. In an era without phone calls across long distances or any form of instant communication, their relationship survived almost entirely through letters. It was in one of those letters that Fred proposed. They married in 1952, beginning a partnership that would last more than 50 years. What made their marriage remarkable was not its perfection, but its honesty. Joanne Rogers spoke openly in later interviews, including those featured in Morgan Neville's acclaimed 2018 documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor?, about the fact that her husband, while genuinely kind, was not a saint in the way the public sometimes imagined. He was a man who worked at his gentleness. He chose patience deliberately day after day, rather than simply possessing it as an effortless trait. He kept rigorous personal routines, swimming every morning and monitoring his weight so carefully that he maintained it at exactly 143 pounds for most of his adult life, a number he later explained stood for I love you, 1 letter for I, 4 for love, 3 for you. It was a small, quiet ritual, but it revealed something important about the man behind the sweater. His kindness was intentional, practiced, and at times, difficult to sustain. Joanne also spoke about the emotional weight Fred carried from his work. Millions of children looked to him for comfort and guidance, and that responsibility never fully left him, even after the cameras stopped rolling. She was often the one who handled discipline with their 2 sons, James and John, because Fred struggled with that role, having built his public identity around gentleness rather than firmness. Their household was not a perfectly balanced fairy tale. It was, as Joanne described it in various interviews over the years, alive, occasionally messy, and deeply real. Music remained central to their relationship throughout, with the couple often playing piano duets together, something that connected them long after the demands of television production pulled Fred in countless directions. The deeper and more difficult truth Joanne eventually shared involved the final chapter of Fred's life. In the early 2000s, Fred Rogers began experiencing stomach discomfort that he initially tried to manage quietly on his own, adjusting his diet and pushing through the discomfort rather than seeking immediate medical attention. When the pain became impossible to ignore, doctors diagnosed him with stomach cancer that had already progressed. The news was devastating, not just for Fred, but for Joanne, who found herself stepping into the role of caregiver for the man who had spent his entire career caring for others. She has described that period as one filled with both profound love and immense emotional strain, watching someone so full of purpose and energy confront a battle that offered little hope of recovery. Even as his health declined, Fred remained committed to the people and causes he loved. In January 2003, only weeks before his death, he served as Grand Marshal of the Rose Parade in Pasadena, a public appearance that few in the crowd realized would be among his last. After undergoing surgery to remove part of his stomach, he spent time recovering in the hospital before finally returning home. Joanne has recalled how, even in his weakened state, sitting at the piano brought him small but meaningful moments of peace. Music, which had defined their courtship and their marriage, remained a source of comfort until nearly the very end. Fred Rogers passed away quietly at his home on February 27, 2003, surrounded by family, just one day after his grandson's birthday. For years afterward, Joanne largely kept the more painful details of his final months private, partly out of respect for the calm, composed image Fred had spent his career cultivating. But as time passed, she came to believe that shielding the public from that vulnerability did a disservice to his legacy rather than protecting it. In her view, allowing people to see that Fred struggled, that he felt fear and exhaustion like anyone facing a terminal illness, made his lifelong choice to lead with kindness even more meaningful. It wasn't the absence of struggle that made him remarkable. It was his decision to keep choosing gentleness in spite of it. In the years following his death, Joanne spoke about grief with the same honesty she brought to discussing his illness. She rejected the idea that mourning follows a tid. Why timeline, once reflecting publicly that even years later, some days left her feeling strong and others left her feeling completely worn down. That kind of candor, rare from someone so closely associated with an icon of calm reassurance, added a layer of humanity to a story the public had mostly experienced through a soft focus lens. Rather than retreating from public life after Fred's death, Joanne became an active steward of his legacy. She served as chair emerita of Fred Rogers Productions, the company responsible for continuing his work through new programs like Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, which carried forward his emphasis on emotional literacy for young children. She appeared in documentaries, gave interviews, and even took on a small cameo role in the 2019 film, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, starring Tom Hanks as her late husband. Each appearance offered audiences a glimpse of the woman who had known the real Fred Rogers, not the character audiences watched on television, but the complicated, disciplined, sometimes weary man who worked every day to embody the values he taught. The number 143 outlived Fred Rogers in ways he likely never imagined. In 2019, the state of Pennsylvania officially designated May 23 as 143 Day, marking the 143rd day of the year and encouraging residents to perform small acts of kindness in his honor. It was a fitting tribute to a man who had turned a simple numerical code into a lifelong practice of love. Joanne Rogers passed away on January 14, 2021, at the age of 92, in the same Pittsburgh home she had shared with Fred for decades. She was survived by their 2 sons and by a legacy that, thanks largely to her own willingness to speak honestly, became richer and more complete than the one the public had known while Fred was alive. Together, Fred and Joanne Rogers never sought attention for its own sake. What they built instead was something steadier, a partnership grounded in music, patience, and an unwavering belief that love, expressed consistently and without pretense, could change lives. The truth Joanne eventually shared was never meant to diminish Fred Rogers. It was meant to complete him. Behind the calm voice and the familiar cardigan was a man who worked hard to be good, who carried real burdens, and who faced his final days with a mixture of fear and grace that few ever witnessed. In choosing to reveal that vulnerability, Joanne didn't tarnish the legend of Mr. Rogers. She gave the world permission to understand that kindness isn't something people are simply born with. It's something they choose again and again, even when it's hard, even when no one is watching, and even when the end is near.